The question is that the amendment be disagreed to, and I give the call to the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I thank the member for Dunkley and the member for Lilly for their contributions that it's a pleasure to be following tonight, and I join them in talking about Labor's strong commitment to early childhood education and care that has been a long-standing commitment for Labor. We support the legislation tonight that the government has moved, which is about addressing the problems that we're seeing with childcare in Australia at the moment. But this is largely a massively missed opportunity and sadly another example of where the government has seen what has become a political problem and gone just far enough to that they think they have solved it. They are not actually addressing with this legislation the deep-seated problems with the childcare system that we are seeing, the crushing costs that are meaning that parents aren't able to work as much as they would like to, are staying out of the workforce or aren't increasing to that extra day because they simply can't afford it. And this is wrong. This is bad for families, this is bad for women, and it's bad for the economy. And it's bad for the little children that miss out on this incredible opportunity to access high-quality early childhood education and care. We know that in the preschool years, children's brains are developing at the greatest rate for their entire lives, and what they learn in this time will set them up for the rest of their lives and has impact on that trajectory for them. It's an incredibly important part of our education system, yet it's not quite treated equally by the federal government. One of the most exciting parts, I think, of Labor's policy is that we will task the Productivity Commission in government to look at a universal childcare system that would enable this to be treated more like public school, where everyone can access these great benefits. And also, when we make childcare affordable, it changes the conversation about who is doing the work and who is doing the caring in the family unit. It makes it an equal discussion between men and women, and that is so important. What I want to emphasise there is choice. I think both mothers and fathers have a role in raising young children and taking, balancing work and family at that time. Unfortunately, on the other side of the chamber, we have seen in recent months the discussion where they, in their party room where they referred to this as potentially outsourcing, they referred to early childhood education and care as outsourcing parenting. And we're worried that if we made it too affordable, that women might be forced into the workforce. And I think that just shows how incredibly out of touch the Liberal National Party are with families, with Australian women and with the Australian community, who are wanting more and more to balance parenting and work and to access the great benefits of early childhood education and care. This is not just about childminding, and I want to take this opportunity to again acknowledge the incredible work that early childhood educators do. It's a mixture of really skilled educating of these little Australians, and as a mother of a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, I am very alive to the challenges of dealing with these very young people and trying to understand how their young minds work. The member for Macarthur is nodding. So I just, but it's combining that also with this deep care that they have. And I always was, like all parents, when you first go to take your child to early childhood education and care, there is a little bit of hesitancy with leaving your child somewhere. But to see what my son learnt and how he was cared for has been incredibly important for me to see that. And one of the most touching things was that when my son was very, very hard to get to have his nap, and that one of his educators used to, at home we used to push him in the pram to get him to sleep, and one of his educators used to basically sit rocking him for the entirety of his nap. And the fact that she would make that time for one individual child just shows the dedication and the patience that these educators provide, and it's about time that they were given the respect that they deserve by the federal government. Early childhood and education and care has been through an absolute rollercoaster ride through this pandemic when it comes to the government's stance, and nothing has brought home how incredibly important this essential service is for families and for our economy and for our community than this pandemic. I probably don't need to go through it again, but basically, at first and throughout lockdown, and we're seeing it again now with Sydney and much of Queensland in lockdown and another recent lockdown in Victoria, that early childhood education and care is an essential service that has been required to stay open. But as people are not working, the government is not stepping in to provide help for those families this time to cover those extra costs. And our amendment has asked that they should, but I understand the government is going to vote against that, and I think that is incredibly irresponsible. When COVID-19 first hit, it was only after pressure from Labor that the government finally stepped up to address the issue that this essential service needed to continue, and that families that were out of work at the time couldn't cope with this. They then announced that it was free childcare, but they didn't back the centres in and actually support them to provide that. And then finally we've got the outcome, which is the childcare system that we see now, which is failing families, providers and our youngest Australians. Costs are skyrocketing. Costs are skyrocketing at the moment, and I'm sure all of us hear this from families in our electorates. I know that I certainly do, here in the electorate of Canberra, where we have some of the highest average childcare fees in the country. And I hear very regularly that families are not being able to work as much as they would like because they simply can't afford it. Well, if the government really wanted to address this, rather than address the need to have something to say about childcare, rather than actually fixing the system, they would have a look at Labor's policy. We announced this last October, and they have followed in our footsteps of announcing something about childcare, but it simply does not go far enough. It doesn't benefit the number of families that ours does, and it only benefits them for a short time. Labor's policy will benefit 97% of families. We see this as an important economic measure. Our policy will benefit families regardless of their number of children, and right through until their children are in school if they are accessing out-of-school hours care. It benefits more families for longer. It does not differentiate on the size of the family. It has no age cut-off and applies to all children using outside of school hours care during primary school. 86% of families, or over 851,000 families in the system, will be unambiguously better off under Labor's policy. 6% receive approximately the same benefit under both policies, and only 8% will be better off under the Liberals' policy. The ABS data confirms that Scott Morrison's childcare system has completely failed in less than 3 years. The cost of childcare is now higher than it was even under the previous childcare system, with a 0.3% increase than it has ever been. The data shows that childcare costs are out of control, soaring by 2.2% in the past quarter alone, more than 3 times CPI. And really importantly, the number of parents who are saying that they are staying at home mainly they are not working mainly due to the cost of childcare has increased by 23% in the last year. That's around 91,700 parents that are not working because the cost of childcare is too high. They want to work, but they can't. And this is a handbrake on our economy that we cannot afford, particularly as we are battling a global pandemic. The data also shows that the median cost of childcare has soared by 5.6% in the year from 2019 to 2020 to $523 a week on average. This is not good enough for Australian families. In contrast, Labor has a plan to bring down the cost of childcare and keep it down for 97% of families. An Albanese Labor government will introduce the Cheaper Childcare for Working Families package, which will scrap the $10,560 childcare subsidy cap, which often sees women losing money from an extra day's work, lift the maximum childcare subsidy rate to 90%, and increase the childcare subsidy rates and taper them for every family earning less than $530,000. It will also task the ACCC with designing a price regulation mechanism to shed light on costs and fees and drive them down for good. And as I previously mentioned, we'll task the Productivity Commission with looking into a universal free childcare system, which ultimately, in my view, is what this country needs. UNICEF's new report, Where Do Rich Countries Stand on Childcare, ranks countries on their childcare policies based on affordability, access, quality and parental leave. And overall, Australia ranks a dismal 37th out of 41 countries. UNICEF found that Australia is one of only 8 countries where childcare consumes at least a quarter of the average wage. This is simply not good enough. Another question for the government. They're in government now. Why does their package not start until July 2022? So a good thing about that is that Australians are most likely to face an election before then, and they can choose between these two policies and these two alternative governments. One that's doing a quick fix that benefits some families only while they've got 2 or more children in childcare at once, so that assistance will be ripped away from them when the older child starts school. Or a Labor government that deeply values early childhood education and care, and what this means for our youngest Australians, for families, for parents wanting to enter the workforce or increase their hours, who value the importance of this for our economy, and who are going to make it better for 97% of families. 97% of families would be better off under Labor's policy, and that's 86% are better off under ours in comparison to the Liberals' policy, which won't start till July 2022. So I would urge people to, if they haven't yet, to go to our online calculator and look at just how much better off they would be under Labor's policy. This is an incredibly important package, and the fact that we announced it back in October shows that this is something we are deeply committed to and we understand, because we are deeply committed to Australian families and we understand what's important to them. We listen to them in our electorates. We know how important it is for people to be able to afford childcare, to return to work, particularly as we battle with a global pandemic. And our policy will see those families better off. It will see that conversation at the kitchen table about who's going to return to work and who can afford it changed as childcare becomes more affordable. This is incredibly important for children, for families, for women, and for our economy. This pandemic has really shown us how important early childhood education and care is in a range of ways, including for our community. Last week was Early Learning Matters Week, and I had the pleasure to visit Good Start at ANU. And, you know, I wanted to go there to thank the educators for everything that they do, but I was honoured to be asked to open their community food pantry. And I think that this shows just how embedded these centres are in our community. They've opened a pantry donated by a local business who built the beautiful pantry, with the food also donated by local businesses, the O'Connor IGA and also the O'Connor Pharmacy, and from parents, because they had noticed the need in the community since the pandemic, probably including a lot of students from ANU and people in that vicinity who are needing help with these things, as well as families at the centre. And so on a week that was about celebrating them, they decided to make it about something for their community. And I think that says everything we need to know about early childhood education and care and how important it is within our communities. And I again thank those wonderful educators in my electorate and around the country. And I urge the government to think again about supporting our amendment to ensure that families can meet the costs of childcare while in lockdown. A lockdown that so many Australians are now facing because this federal government has failed on the 2 jobs it had: to manage a vaccination rollout and get a national quarantine system that was functioning well. If not for this, we would not be in this lockdown now. Thank you, Deputy.